I've had the chance to use both ultra-fast-acting insulins, Fiasp and Lyumjev. I sort of thought they were pretty much interchangeable, but I quickly realized that I preferred one over the other, and that really surprised me. And this all started because I registered with a new endocrinologist, and they had a sample of Lyumjev. They were like, give it a go. And honestly, I was a little bit disappointed it wasn't Fiasp, because that was the brand that rang in my ear as ultra-fast-acting insulin. I actually hadn't heard of Lyumjev before. So I was a little bit disappointed, but I was like, it's a free bottle of insulin, but of course I'll take it. So immediately I started using Lyumjev in my insulin pump, which is the Omnipod 5 on auto mode, and wow. Immediately I noticed that I could be more spontaneous with what I was eating because I wasn't having to pre-bolus so far in advance. And also personally with the Omnipod 5, I experienced a lot of those runaway highs that I've had on the Omnipod 5 off and on. Those were very much blunted because my blood sugar was more reactive and coming back down as opposed to just climbing. So for me, particularly on the Omnipod 5, I loved using the fast-acting insulin. So of course, immediately I'm like, let's go. I love this insulin. And found out that my insurance needed prior authorization for Lyumjev. That was taking a little while to come through. So I spoke to the nurse about that, and she said, oh, well, your insurance approves Fiasp, so let's put you on Fiasp. So immediately I'm thinking these are going to be the same. I didn't think twice about it. However, when I started Fiasp, I noticed that it was not as reactive for me as I had with Lyumjev. Now, immediately I didn't come to any conclusions because, of course, it can depend on the absorption of the site, etc., where you're on your cycle as a woman, all of that stuff. So I didn't really want to come to any immediate conclusions, but I was a little bit like, So I continued on Fiasp because I had filled that prescription. So I got a very good look into the overall picture of Fiasp. I was probably on it for about a month and a half, maybe even 2 months. So I really wanted to try again the Lyumjev to especially compare those back to back again, but in the opposite direction. So coming from Fiasp onto Lyumjev. And I was very lucky in that my insurance approved this prior authorization. So I could then go ahead and the next go round of refills, fill Lyumjev rather than the Fiasp. Immediately when I went back to Lyumjev, it was just better. It was just that little bit better. We're not talking huge differences. And again, this is probably very bio-individual, but it was just better for me. I just really saw a marked difference of how quickly my body reacted to it and how well, especially it worked with the Omnipod 5, not letting those highs run away. A lot of people are going to ask about stinging because both of these insulins are a bit notorious for stinging upon injection. And apparently, I think that has something to do with the accelerant that they use, which is like some kind of vasodilator. Not a doctor, please don't take my word for it. But I've heard that that is why the stinging occurs. I personally haven't had that big of an issue with the stinging with Fiasp or with Lyumjev. Maybe experienced it ever so slightly more, like maybe 5% more on Lyumjev as opposed to Fiasp. But a lot of it depends on where my pod is or where the injection site is. I guess the bottom line for me on that was the stinging was not enough of an issue for me to even consider coming off either ultra-fast-acting insulins. Something that I read that I thought was very interesting is some people mix like a Fiasp or a Lyumjev with a Humalog, so a not ultra-fast-acting insulin. They mix the two to mitigate that stinging. Apparently that's very helpful. I thought that was super interesting. I also thought it was very interesting that Fiasp is approved for kids and adults, and Lyumjev only adults. And Fiasp also only comes in U100, whereas Lyumjev comes in U100 and U200. So that 200 is a double strength insulin. Interestingly enough, on Lyumjev, apparently the accelerant that causes that stinging is the same amount in both U100 and U200. So some people that have had some issues with that stinging have opted to go for the U200, then that makes the bolus shorter and therefore mitigates some of that stinging. I thought that was so interesting. Lyumjev is a little bit newer than Fiasp. I think Lyumjev was released in 2020. So there's that difference, not that it really makes a difference particularly. And interestingly enough, on Reddit, of course, when I was comparing the two, I really wanted to look to see if other people had this experience. Some people just had horrific stinging on one and not the other, vice versa. Some people really loved one over the other. Again, I can't really stress enough how probably individual this is. I found it interesting that there was a comparison at all, and I sort of stumbled into being able to compare the two because of that initial experience with the Lyumjev and the prior authorization, and then going to Fiasp, and now back to Lyumjev, which is where I've landed. Probably if I had tried the Fiasp first, I would have never tried the Lyumjev because I didn't even know Lyumjev was an alternative. I just knew that brand name of Fiasp. It's always interesting and was a great reminder to me that there are other things out there that can help make living with this condition a little bit easier, and Lyumjev has especially offered me that helping hand a little bit in dealing with it all. That's my experience. If you guys have experienced both or one and you particularly love it or hate it, let me know in the comments down below. I would be so interested to hear. Some people have some pretty strong opinions. It just goes to show you how individual we are, and it's pretty fascinating. If you have any questions, comments, please, please, please meet me down in the comments section. We can get a good discussion going, which is always helpful to the entire community. I'm just one voice, but all those voices in the comments section are so helpful, and it helps other people connect, compare, contrast. As always, I wish you a wonderful day wherever you are in this world. I wish you great blood sugars, all the positive insulin experiences, but most of all, I wish you a happy, healthy mind with it all. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.